A few thoughts. Some numbers of you folks have heard me bring these thoughts across the country, but it has to do with loving your people. And if some have compassion, making a difference. If I were to give you what I think the translation of that is, it'd be this. And on some have compassion, which makes a difference. I want to talk to you this morning on what is the difference. I know what you say. I know. It's all that promotion. That's what it is. Now you got to be kidding. No kid's going to come to Sunday school 52 Sundays a year to get a balloon every Sunday. And once you've seen one person swallow a goldfish, you've seen all of them. The truth is, I'm not about to swallow a goldfish. Oh, we're going to go to hell before I swallow a goldfish. Vineyard wants to swallow a goldfish, that's his business, but Hyles ain't going to do it. I want to let them grow up first and then fry them in meal. But what is the difference? Really, what is the difference? I'm a fundamentalist. Old-fashioned, rock rib, barn storming, hell, fire and damnation, window rattling, shingle pulling fundamentalist. I dot every fundamental I and cross every fundamental T, and I'm proud of the term fundamentalist. I don't even call myself an evangelical. I'm a fundamentalist. Capital F, capital U, capital N, and capital however else you spell it. One of the requirements of being a fundamentalist you can't spell. But I'm a fundamentalist. But I'm disgusted with a fundamentalism that has no compassion. No compassion. Heavenly Father, help me this morning in these next few minutes. Dear Lord, you know how much I want to be a blessing. What's left in life? What else is there but to be a blessing and to try to help somebody? And I pray this morning you'd help me. Oh, God, these people have come so far, and they planned and looked forward, and some have sacrificed, and some have saved for a year. Now here we are, and I'm just a frail creature of dust. Oh, God, work through us this week and in these moments ahead of us. Give us a holy hush now. Amen. First came the light, and after the light, the firmament. And after the firmament, God lit the starry host of the sky, the great light to rule the day. By the way, Ray, put this on a tape, would you please? And the lesser light to rule the night. And then God lit the starry host of the stars as God's chandeliers for his creature. And God said, I hope my people by night will enjoy the stars. And then God made the fishes of the sea and the tribes of the animal kingdom. And God made plant life. He made the strawberries, and he said, I hope my children like the taste of these. And after that, all was ready for man, God's great creation, to be made in the image of God. And it was marvelous. Every tree that grew was pleasant to the sight. For man was in his garden of delights, in Edenic splendor. Rivers flowed peaceably between verdant banks. Every sound was melody, and every scene was delight. There was no war to unrest the breast. There was no sickness to cause the fear of death. No leaf ever withered, and the wind never chilled. No perspiration moistened the brow. There was no profanity. Nobody ever got tired. There was no heat. There was no cold. No blossoms were smitten by a tempest, and the rose never faded. And man had not yet learned how to sigh. or how to weep. No withering frost had chilled the daffodil, and no shadow of guilt was ever known. For Adam was in charge, and there were for his enjoyment choirs of birds to sing by day, and chandeliers of stars to shine by night. And yet, in spite of all of Eden's splendor, something was missing. There was something not quite right. For Adam needed someone to share with him these joys. He yearned for companionship. He longed for communion with a kindred soul whose wants and joys were like his own. The virgin world was cold and blank. There was something Adam needed. He needed somebody to care and somebody to share. And here she comes. God's creation to share with Adam the joys of the Garden of Eden. In all the beauty for a human being to possess. Milton said of her, she was adorned with what all of heaven and earth could bestow to make her amiable. Grace was in her steps. Heaven was in her eye. Her every gesture possessed dignity and love. Perfection was stamped upon her. The sons of God shouted for joy when she came, and the morning stars sang together, and Eden is transformed. As somebody wrote, the earth was sad, the garden wild, the hermit sighed, till woman smiled. The other day I was reading the verses about this. I put to poetry these on the airplane flying back from Seattle, Washington last week. I put to poetry these little lines about what I just said. The voice of God had spoken, so light came into view, yet man could not enjoy it, for it was made for two. He spoke his word to heaven, and fashioned with his might the sun to rule the daytime, the moon to rule the night. Then with his burning censer he lit the starry host. Then God the Holy Father, the Son, and Holy Ghost made beasts to walk on dry land and fish to swim the sea. Then beckoneth to Adam, come, these were made for thee. The voice of God had spoken these pleasures into view, yet man could not enjoy them, for they were made for two. Now, every tree that blossomed was pleasant to the sight, while every sound was music and every scene delight. The leaf was never withered, the frost ne'er chilled the rose, and choirs of birds were singing a song that never closed. No illness ever entered, no sighing or unrest, no dark, no night or shadows, no fear within the breast, while quietly flowed the river between its verdant banks. No writhing reptile crawleth among the flowers' ranks. The voice of God had spoken this paradise into view, yet man did not enjoy it, for it was made for two. No war or sin nor weeping disturbeth Eden's bliss. Though Adam walked in splendor, yet something was amiss. A kindred soul was needed, someone with whom to share the blessedness of Eden, someone to hear and care. Perfection was engraven, the best that God could do, yet man could not enjoy it, for it was made for two. Ah, there she comes in goodness. 'Tis God's creative best, adorned with all the beauty a human can possess. For grace was in her footsteps, and heaven in her face. Perfection draped around her, her eyes bespoke his grace. Now Adam looks at Eden and seeth all things new, for he can now enjoy it, for it was made for two. When one eye moist and weepeth, the other owns a tear. When one ear feels its purpose, the other has to hear. For one hand never clappeth without the other's aid. When one foot fleeth danger, the other is afraid. For joy and mirth and laughter and happiness and fear, bereavement, tears and sadness, and merriment and cheer, yea, all of life's conditions and all that mortals do were made to do together. For all was made for two. And that's what every man and every woman has always needed. Not a creature since Adam has escaped this need for compassion. The weary housewife this morning needs somebody to care. The trudging laborer on his way to work and on his way this evening after a busy day of toil needs someone to care. The aged mother, the lonely student's wife, the busy student, the harried boss, and if you'll let me expose my humanity for just a few moments, you and I need somebody to care. Oh, we say, like it or love it. But down underneath we say, I hope you'll like it. We say, if you don't like what I'm preaching, there's the door. But down underneath we say, I hope you don't use it. I often wish there was some church somewhere that averaged 25,000 in Sunday school. So I could call somebody on Monday morning and say, where do I go from here? You see, we're all here on a round piece of planet, going around and around in space on a little ball. None of us knows much about where we came or to which we're going. We know it's heaven, but we don't know much about it. Compassion is the nurse given to mankind. Compassion cares for the helpless. It mothers the orphan. It feeds the hungry. It clothes the naked. It helps the helpless. It raises the fallen. Compassion presides at the humble fireside. She shines upon coldness and warms it. She shines upon suffering and relieves it. She shines upon sorrow and cheers it. A little lady came to our services and sat over here somewhere on this side not long ago. After I'd preached, she said to her friend, I don't like him. Can you imagine that? Absolutely unbelievable, isn't it? And she said, I don't like him. But she came back that night to not like me some more. And she said again, I don't like him. She came back the next Sunday to hate me again. And she said, I still don't like him. She came back Sunday morning and Sunday night for weeks to not like me. And finally one morning she got in line over here outside my office door after the morning service. And she came to tell me that she didn't care much for my preaching. She wanted to ask me why she kept coming. She didn't know why she kept coming. So she waited outside my office door. When she got to the door, this is what she said. She said, I got in line to tell you off. But she said, I wanted to know why I keep coming to hear you preach. She said, I found out. I know now. I guess I should have known all along. She said, I've been in line waiting, and I saw a college couple come that was leaving, graduating. You don't understand how close you can get to college kids in 4 years. And she said, I saw you tell them goodbye. And she said, I saw you close the door with tears in your eyes, and you had to compose yourself before you could see the next person. And then I watched the other folks. I watched a teenager that came in, was obviously in trouble, done something wrong. She said, I saw you as you opened the door to let him out, and I saw you break down, and I saw you close the door quickly so others wouldn't see you. She said, Reverend, I came to find out why I keep coming. I don't like your preaching, but she said, I'll tell you, I found out. I said, what is it? She took off her glasses and she said, Reverend, the thing that draws me is that moist spot that's always in the corner of your eye. She said, it's always there. It's there when you preach on Sunday morning. It's there when you preach on Sunday night. It's always there. The moist spot in the corner of your eye. Her name is College Wife, USA. She sits in the audience here every Sunday morning, every Sunday night, every Wednesday night. She's rather lonely. May I tell you her story? She grew up in a fundamental church. She fell in love with one of the fine teenage boys there, and they courted and became engaged, and one day they married. He had a job at a factory, and they didn't have very much, and so they found a place to live. It was an apartment upstairs in the attic of a house, but it was theirs. She had him, and she had her, and they were so happy. Then a year or so, she gave birth to a little one. He worked so hard to get promoted, and he did. Another promotion came, another child came, another promotion came, another child came. Every time a child came, there had to be a promotion to come. And then one day he came home and he said, "Sweetheart, I think we have enough money to buy us a new car." And they pushed the old jalopy down to the car place, and they looked. Oh, it was not a Tornado or a Buick, big Buick, or a Cadillac car, or an old 98 or even 88. It was a little thing, the kind that children used to play with. But it was theirs. They packed themselves in it, and for the first time they had a car that they knew would run well. And one day, after about 10 years, he came in and said, "Sweetheart, I think we have enough now for the down payment on the house." They began to look all over town for just the house that was made for them. And finally they found it. It wasn't the most expensive house in town. It was one of the least expensive in town, but it was theirs. And together they bought the furniture, and together they put the drapes up, and together they picked out the carpet. And then was that happy day when they moved in. She was so happy. All of her dreams of childhood have now been fulfilled. My own home, my own car, my own family. How happy she was. She taught a junior girls class, and he taught a teenage boys class maybe. She sang in the choir, and he was an usher, and everything was perfect. All of her dreams. One Sunday night, during the invitation, he came forward. He began to cry and put his head on the pastor's shoulder. And she said, "What's my old man been up to?" And the pastor stood after a while and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, John here has been called to preach." And the whole bottom fell out for her. For she hadn't been called to preach. She'd been called to that house and to that car and to those children. She went home and she said, "John, God's called you to be a lay preacher, hasn't he? Hasn't he, John? Hasn't he? A rescue mission here in town, right? Right?" "No, honey. God's called me to go away to school." "Go away to school?" "But John, God could have called you when you're 18 if he'd wanted you to do that. We've got 2 or 3 kids here. We have a good job. And John, how about the house?" And he said, "But sweetheart, God's called me." And they put a for sale sign out in the front yard. She cursed the first couple that came by to look at the house. She told them all the flaws and told them there were rats in the attic and roaches in the beds. They sold the car and got an old jalopy again. Rented a Hertz trailer and took off for Hammond, Indiana. It was 2 o'clock in the morning because all students arrive at college at 2 o'clock in the morning. They found a place to sleep for the night in one of the luxurious downtown hotels we have here. Next morning they began to look for a place. They went out to the apartments across from the cottage, and she said, "These are nice." And he said, "Yes, but they're $325 a month." Oh. They went to the apartments in Cherryville, and those are nice, she said. Not as nice as the others, but they're very nice. And but they were $285 a month. Oh, they checked the want ads, the classified. They did find something. It was up in the attic. They climbed some stairs and climbed some more stairs and climbed some more stairs. There were 2 feet of snow on the ground. It was 20 below zero, as it always is in Hammond. And John said, "Mary, how do you like it?" And she said, "It's nice. I love it." That's the last she saw of him till he graduated. For he had to get up in the morning at 6 and get ready for school. Went to school till 1 and Had to go to work at 3 and worked till 11 and got home at 12. Had to go to school the next morning at 6. And she waited in the apartment. She said to me, she said, "Preacher, it's not so bad when I know you care. It's not so bad when the preacher has the moist spot in the corner of his eye." Her name is Mamaw, if you live in the South, or Grandma. If you live in the North and don't know good English, it's Grandma. It's a dumb way to say grandma, grandma. Somebody asked one time, said, "What do you think Moses' speech impediment was?" I said, "It may have been a tongue-tied. He may talk like this." Moses couldn't talk plain. Maybe it was the fact he was tongue-tied. Or maybe he had a hair lip. Maybe he had lip palate, and we talked like this. Or maybe Moses' impediment of speech was the worst impediment known to man, a northern accent. I'm not sure what it was, but her name is Grandma or Mamaw. Her address is Rest Home, USA. She may bore you with her fellowship, as she's had very little of it lately. You may have to shout to be heard, for her hearing is not as good because she hasn't had much to hear lately. Food may be dripping from her mouth. She has no offering to give. Her hands may bother you as they tremble, and you may notice a foul odor as you walk in her room. Has not always been that way. For one day she was a mother and a wife. She had a little palace called her home, and she was the queen there. And she busied herself with washing and ironing and cooking and washing the dishes and rearing her family. She heard the footprints of little children, and she saw the footprints on the carpet. She saw the handprints on the towels, but one by one, the children came to the altar. And as we'll do this June the 1st, see our last one leave home. It seemed like the days became hours, and hours became like minutes. And one day, her husband passed away. She didn't want to give up. She tried to keep her house because she's a spunky little old rascal. But she began to fall a great deal, but as the years passed, and the stairs became steeper, and their steps increased in number every time she climbed them. And one day it became apparent she couldn't keep house anymore. So the children had a meeting to try to figure out what to do with Mother. Now, the oldest child only has 3 bedrooms, and he has 4 children, so you wouldn't expect him to take care of his mother, would you? After all, you wouldn't expect him to take care of his mother just because she carried him in her own body and entered into the jaws of death to make him live, and because she took care of him and loved him and fed him and nurtured him and kept him alive and nursed him. You wouldn't expect him to have enough love for his mother to take care of her, would you? He didn't have but 3 bedrooms, you see. Oh, you dirty hypocrite, you sorry backslider, you. But of course, the other children, they didn't make enough money, and you know, the children are growing up, and so Grandma said, "Children, I've got an idea. They have some real nice senior citizens places where people like me go, and there are people like me that we could have a lot of fun together." No mother wants to go. No grandmother. Don't tell me a grandmother wants to leave her grandchildren not to see them grow up. Don't tell me. I wouldn't give a dime for Christianity, you folks that don't take care of your parents. Not a dime, not one dime. There's nothing that quite shows the decadence of American society as these convalescent homes dotting the horizon like great armies of Arab camps on the west bank of the Jordan. Nobody seems to care, and there they rot and remember and decay with nothing to look forward to and nothing to give them joy. Her hands never open a letter. Her ears never hear the ring of a phone. Her cheeks never feel a kiss. Her feet never take her outside, and her eyes never see a loved one or a friend. And there she sits, fellowshipping with her memories. Talked to one of our members in the hospital one day. I started to walk away after I'd prayed a prayer for him before he had surgery. An old man, 88 years old, in the next bed. I usually talk to him, but I had to rush to the broadcast. I was late that morning for the broadcast. I heard an old voice say, "Reverend! Reverend!" I turned around, there's an 88-year-old man in the next bed. He said, "Reverend," he said, "would you pray that same prayer for me you just prayed for him?" As best I could, I did. And the old man took my hand with tears streaming down his cheeks, and he said, "Reverend, I'm 88 years old. And that's the first time anybody ever prayed for me. Oh, let me tell you something. In this great Chicagoland area, there's a sea of tears and a river of tears flowing all the time, and somebody needs to care. Oh, I'm not concerned about a hellfire minister on preaching. I'm not concerned about that without the moist spot in the corner of the eye." I'll say this too. The song the kids sang a while ago, I believe every word of it. Both of them. But I'm not interested in any kind of conviction that doesn't have a moist spot in the corner of the eye. Oh, by the way, you once paid this mammal attention because you didn't have a church then. And you used to fight when you were in school to get to go to the rest home and preach because you had no place else to preach. But now you have your padded pews and your carpeted aisles and your chandeliers, and you have your own church. And you don't need the old gal anymore, but she's still there where you left her years ago. Remembering. Remembering. His name is Johnny. For all little boys are named Johnny. They're used in preachers' illustrations. His address is Ghetto, USA. He's a poor little fella. He didn't know he was poor till one day he visited a friend's house and saw what the friend's house had. And there he noticed he was different. The clothes were different, and the house was different, and the food was different, and the furniture was different, and the car was different. And little Johnny realized he was poor. One day his mom and dad called him into the living room, as my mom and dad did me one day, and said, "Johnny," his mother said, "Johnny," as my mother said to me, "your daddy is leaving home today. He'll not live here anymore." And little Johnny couldn't understand why Daddy couldn't stay at home. I recall today when I got on my knees and looked up at my Daddy from my knees and said, "Daddy, wouldn't you rather have me than a bottle of whiskey?" And my dad turned to walk away, never to walk back in again. His mom got busy working, for she had to make a living, and Johnny hardly gets to see his mother. Maybe he doesn't even know who his dad is. His only Christmas is if the church doesn't forget. I can see my mother now, Christmas Eve night, when I was a little boy. I can see her that afternoon going out in the woods. Said posted, "Keep out," but I can see her crawling across that posted sign and stealing a Christmas tree out of somebody's pasture or field so her boy would have a Christmas tree. I can see her decorating it on Christmas Eve night with my dad out drunk, and I can hear her now. She knelt and she said, "Oh, God," she said, "send somebody to give my boy something for Christmas." She thought I was in bed, but I wasn't. I was tiptoeing, hearing her. She'd say, "Oh, God, somehow give my boy a Christmas." Next morning, early, I heard a bell ringing outside. Heard a fellow say, "Ho, ho, 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 everybody, Merry Christmas." I didn't know his name, but he had on a red suit trimmed in white, a long white beard. He was from the Fernwood Baptist Church. Somebody cared. He never had a birthday cake or felt the shiny new pair of shoes on his feet. Nobody ever said, "Little Johnny, you're a cute little fella." And he may even suspicion you when you first go by and visit him. And he may even disturb your worship service the first Sunday morning he's here. I recall the day we dedicated this building, I'll never forget it. A crowd bigger than this was here, and about 1,500 folks out in those hallways, just packing the hallways out. I wanted to have a dignified service. That's a real hard thing for me to do. But I practiced that week, and I want to have a dignified service. Not ritual, but dignity. And the mayor was here, and the city councilman, a bunch of dignitaries. And that morning I even studied for my sermon. And some of you fellows ought to try it. And I tried to be eloquent. And right in the middle of my declamation, for it was borrowed from someone else, a little 5-year-old boy, a bus kid, he wasn't supposed to be in here, but he got in here. Right up there in the middle, in that balcony, somebody made a mistake and gave that boy a bulletin. And I looked up there and saw him in the back row right up there. And I saw him going into the aircraft building industry. And I'd preach and glance up there to see how the production was coming along. And finally, it rolled off the assembly line. I could see he was looking down here, surveying for a landing strip somewhere. Right in the middle of my sermon that morning on the loveliness of Christ, Cape Canaveral became in the balcony right up here. And down it came, right over here. You say, "Brother Hyles, what in the world did you do?" I stopped and went, "You say, weren't your people embarrassed? What did your people do in that service?" They all went. "You say, Brother Hyles, was the mayor here?" "Yeah, the mayor was here." "What did the mayor do?" He went. I know buses are expensive. And your auditorium is too pretty now to have bus kids messing it up. And you have a pretty good drive-in crowd anyway. And gasoline's getting pretty high. A lot of little kids still need loving. I guess the reason that I love bus kids is because if they'd had buses when I was a kid, I'd have been one. I'm so glad, and I'm not going to enter any kind of a battle, theological, stupid, ecclesiastical battle, arguing over a balloon. Isn't that something to argue over? Good night. You got a dry adult theater 6 or 8 blocks from here, and we spend our time fighting preachers to give out balloons. You got to go down with Elijah. You know that? You really are. You really are a battler, boy. I'll let it be sure. I mean, we got a adult bookstore. A gal, you go down, right down here for $3, less than 5 blocks from here, and put $3 down. A gal will strip to her waist and shine your shoes naked from the waist up. And you got this nude bathing less than 2 blocks from here every weekend. Now, if you want to spend your time fighting somebody gives a balloon out on Sunday, go ahead, but you're an idiot as far as I'm concerned. I'm so thankful that I grew up before folks found it was sinful to give a kid a balloon, and I'm so glad no one thought it sinful to give a poor kid a toy. The first toy I ever had, I got at Sunday school. The first hamburger I ever ate. My teacher said, "Jackie, boy, did you eat any breakfast?" And I said, "No, ma'am." And she said, "Did you have anything for supper last night?" And I said, "No, ma'am." And she said, "Did you have anything to eat yesterday?" And I said, "No, ma'am." And she took the only quarter she had and gave it to somebody and said, "Go buy Jackie, boy, a hamburger." Now, if that's wrong, God's not God. Oh, somebody, "Yeah, you're trying to bribe the kids." the reason you would do it if you gave one? I can't tell you why you'd do it, but I'll tell you why we do it. I wish you knew the people in this church that go without the food themselves and go without clothing themselves to take care of these poor little boys and girls that ride these buses. I wish you knew how many of these young teenagers up here last night, these bus kid teenagers that go to our bus kid high school. I wish you knew how many of them were wearing clothes last night. They were bought with the sacrificial gifts of our people, and many of them our college kids that came by themselves, a rag for their bodies. Little Johnny needs to have a preacher who has a moist spot in the corner of his eye. Compassion makes a difference. Makes a difference to the suffering. What I do? Every week of my life in some motel room across America, I take my handkerchief in the afternoon and morning, and I do it like this. And I tie it. And I'll spend 10, 15 to 30 minutes walking around my room. I'll try to find my clothing, and I'll try to dress myself. I'll try to shave and brush my teeth and comb my hair with my eyes covered. You say, why? Because I want those people last night that stood right here blind, I want them to say, that man up there on the platform, he loves me. And he has compassion, and he suffers with me, and he wants to feel what I feel. Every week, I take some cotton or Kleenex or something and stop my ears and walk in silence for 15 to 30 minutes so those deaf people can look at me and say, that man up there, they sit back here always, that man up there, that's my preacher, he loves me. Listen, there wasn't a person on this platform last night that didn't know Brother Hyles loves them. Not a one. You ask them. Not a person. And there's not a person in this church that comes often who even tries in his own heart. Not a person who tries to discern. Not a one! What knows Brother Hyles loves them? Your people have a right, a perfect right, to have a preacher back home who feels their pain and hurts when they hurt and suffers when they suffer. And he carries with him always a compassionate heart. It's manifested by a moist spot in the corner of the eye. As I said last night, I go to the cemetery and remember our dead. I tiptoe to the mission and stay there a while. I drive to the steel mills and look in or walk through and look at the places where my men are working, many of them at this very moment, under most undesirable conditions. Quite often I crawl on the floor for a while, for we have a lady in our church that is almost blind and has lost her equilibrium. She does her housework crawling on her hands and knees. I want to know how she feels. I drive to the ghetto and remember when I was a kid. And I park and watch the bus kids and drive by the houses of our people. I want to identify with them when they're hungry, when they're lonely, when they're poor, at their work, at their college, the broken homes. I want to identify. Compassion makes a difference. Compassion not only makes a difference to the saint, to the suffering, but compassion makes a difference to the sinner. You say, how is it you preach so mean? and folks keep coming. Dr. Elmer Towns came here one time. He was writing this book on the world's 10 largest Sunday schools. And I'm deaf on ushers. I'm deaf on ushers. I took a poll one time and found that statistics show that all the ushers in America were laid end to end around the equator. It'd be a wonderful thing. If you come to church here, you know I'm deaf on ushers. You get my tapes, you hear me, I'm deaf on them. One morning, right back in this door right here, I think it was, I was preaching, and while I'm preaching, nobody's supposed to walk in, and something happened, and I stopped and said, "Good night, usher. You know what you're supposed to do. You know it, my kind, compassionate way with a moist spot in the corner of my eye. You know what you're supposed to do. After the service, Dr. Elmer Towns rushed back to that usher, and he said something like this, and I'm not quoting him, but something like this, said, "Are you going to leave the church? Are you mad?" The usher said, "Why should I be mad?" He said, "The way the pastor singled you out and embarrassed you in front of the entire congregation this morning." He said, "Aren't you going to leave the church and get mad?" The usher looked at him. Tears welled up in his eyes, and he said, "Of course not." He said, "It was said a long time ago. That's my preacher up there." He said, "Mister," he said, "if that man loved you like he loves me, if that man has told you as many times he appreciates you as he's told me, if that man has helped rear your family," one of the men that stood here this morning, his son-in-law, said, "If that man helped you rear your girls like he helped me rear mine, and if he loved you and buried your dead and prayed for your young and preached for you like that man has to me, if you had that man love you like he loves me, he can say anything to you he wants to and you wouldn't get mad." You see, you'd be amazed how hard you could preach if you got that moist spot in the corner of your eye. Skipping much of what I was going to say because of time, but I was out in the dentist shop that my dentist used to have out here in Highland, Indiana. And I was there one day, and the dentist's wife was his nurse and also his receptionist, and I'd witnessed to her, but I couldn't get anywhere at all with her. I'd tried several times, but I couldn't make any progress at all. She wasn't interested in being saved. One day I was waiting for my turn. While I was waiting, an old lady walked in, real old, sort of fat, a print dress on. It didn't fit, just hung like a sack. It may have been a sack, and she had on tennis shoes, and she's holding some bleedy false teeth in her hand with blood on them. And she said, "Could I see Dennis, please?" And the dentist's wife, who's receptionist and nurse, said, "Hey, he's busy now, Mary. You'll have to wait." My teeth, they don't fit. My teeth don't fit. And I got to get them to fit. And the dentist's wife said, "Mary," said, "your guarantee's passed. You can't work on you now without paying, without you pay." "Oh, hey, money, but my teeth don't fit. Somebody's got to pay, but my teeth fit." She said, "Mary, I told you, the guarantee's passed, Mary. There's nothing we can do. You should have come earlier." "I could have come earlier. It's been bad weather and snowing, and I don't have any car, and I don't have any way to get here. But my teeth don't fit, and I hurt." And blood was dripping down from her cheek, from her mouth. And I stepped up and I said to the wife of the dentist, I said, "How much would it cost to make her a new set of teeth?" And she said, "A little over $400. And I said, "Make her a new set and put it on my bill." And she said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Just make her a new set." You see, folks, I have a little money I put aside for a rainy day. And every day I find somebody it's raining on. She said, "Do you mean that, Reverend?" I said, "I mean it." A few days passed. I got a phone call from the dentist's wife. She said, "Reverend, I haven't slept since you were in here." She said, "Reverend, I got to talk to you." She said, "Ever since you were in here and offered to buy the teeth for that old lady," she said, "Reverend, I can't sleep." She said, so she came to my office and she came in weeping. And she said, "Reverend, I didn't want to be saved before, but," she said, "I can do it now. I can do it now." You say, "What's the difference?" It's the moist spot in the corner of the eye. Brethren, go home and love your people and brag on them and be close to them and care for them and pray with them and be unselfish with them and share with them. Now, the truth is, you can say what you want to say. Yeah, you say it's Hyles' humor. Yeah, that's what it is. Boy, all those funny jokes he tells, boy, that'll draw them. You ought to hear the same old jokes for 20 years. I just hold a number up now. You ought to hear them. 20 years. No. my folks love me, and so they laugh at my jokes. But it's sort of a, it's same old one over. No, it's not that. You see, folks, jokes will bear thin. Oh, you say, I've heard you preach when you're very dynamic. That'll also get old. You see, dynamics won't wear very well. And humor, though I believe in humor, it won't wear. The three words: love never faileth. Love never faileth. Down in the human heart, crushed with a tempter, feelings lie buried that grace can restore. Touched by a loving heart, wakened by kindness, chords that were broken and vibrate once more. I'm a fundamentalist. I'm against it all. There's nobody in this room against more things than I'm against. I'm an old-fashioned fundamentalist. I believe in hell, fire, and damnation. A lady walked up to me one time and said, Brother Hyles, could I ask you a question? I said, yes. She said, are you against? I said, yes, I am. Yes, I am. But brethren, I've felt the pulse of fundamentalists for many years. I'm a grizzled old veteran. Over 23,000 times I preached. The old voice is fast being. It's not what it used to be. But I think I know the heartbeat of fundamentalists. I think we ought to stand. I think we ought to fight. I think we ought to die. But brethren, we'll kill ourselves if while we preach on hell, and while we preach on judgment, and while we fight the devil, and while we preach against sin, we'll destroy ourselves if we don't keep the moist spot in the corner of the eye. And so this week, if we can send you home, and your people can say next Sunday morning, he cares. Little lady sat right up there one Sunday, Spanish speaking, couldn't speak a word of English. Very wealthy, I guess. She had on a mink coat, not a coat. She may have stole the coat, but she had on a mink coat right there. We had a wall right here then. The pulpit was right here. We just had this side of the building. Invitation time came. She walked down the aisle, down there, right down the center aisle. I met her right here. And I said, did you want to be saved? And she said, no, hablo inglés. For you dumb bunnies, that means I can't speak English. For those of us who are international linguists, we know already. And so I called one of our Spanish-speaking men to witness to her. And he got her saved. And after the service ended, I went up to her and I said, I talked her through the interpreter. And I asked her, could you hear what I said? No. Could you understand what I said? Not a word. I said, well, why did you come forward then? What did I do to make you want to get saved? And she looked at me with a smile of heaven of a new convert on her face. And she said, Reverend, it just looks so good. She said, I had a nephew who died with leukemia, little Mexican boy. She said, I came to the funeral a few days ago, and she said, while you preached at the funeral, I couldn't understand what you were saying. But she said, I could understand the tears, and you'd smile, and you looked like you cared. And I could tell by looking at you that you meant it. And I said, I'm going to go back and hear him preach on a Sunday. All I can do is hear you. I can't understand you. But she said, Reverend, this morning while you preached, she said, you'd thunder out. And then you'd get soft and comforting. And I couldn't understand what was funny, but I could see you laughing. She said, you look so happy, and you look so sincere, and you look like you cared. She said, I didn't get saved because I could understand you. I got saved because it looks so What's the difference? Promotion? No. You know better than that. That's just your rationalizing. What's the difference? Good peppy music? You know better than that. What's the difference? Personality? Humor? Compassion. It's the moist spot in the corner of the eye. Our Heavenly Father, I pray today that the dried sermons are over. I pray the tearless soul-winning days are gone. I pray the dry eye and the cold heart will cease. And I pray, dear Jesus, in this week, you'll help us to get knowledge in our head, warmth in our hearts, and a moist spot in the corner of the eye. In Jesus' name, amen.